Hey everyone, my name is DJ. You might have seen me places on the internet like the Command Zone or Commander at Home or the JumboCommander YouTube channel. That's the channel that I run on YouTube. Today, I'm looking at Graveyard Overdrive, and actually, I'm going to build a commander deck from one of the legendaries in here. Let's take a look at the face commander, Disa the Restless. Disa the Restless is 2 black, red, green for a 5/6 legendary creature human scout. Whenever a Lurgoyf permanent card is put into your graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, put it onto the battlefield. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a Tarmogoyf token. The idea of a Tarmogoyf token is super sweet. If I wanted a really cool tribal Tarmogoyf deck, then this would be the deck for me, full of Pyrogoyf and Polygoyf and Barogoyf. Like, those are some sweet cards. But I have a lot of tribal decks, and so I'm a lot more interested in the backup commander for this deck. It is Coram the Undertaker. Coram the Undertaker is 1 black, red, green for a 0/5 legendary human warrior. Coram the Undertaker gets +X+0, where X is the greatest power among creature cards in all graveyards. Whenever Coram attacks, each player mills a card. During each of your turns, you may play a land and cast a spell from among cards in graveyards that were put there from libraries this turn. So without any graveyard synergies, this card doesn't do very much. But if you build around it just right, you can have the biggest creatures in your graveyard, letting Coram be gigantic and smash in. If you find ways to put cards into your graveyard, then it's almost like Coram's drawing you extra cards every turn, letting you play land drops. In fact, this can hit your opponent's decks too, so you can start stealing cards from them. Oh, that's always fun. So Coram can get pretty big if you have the right creature cards in your graveyard. One of the cards in the precon is Necrogoyf, and this creature's power is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. We also have Ashaya, Soul of the Wild, which has power equal to the number of lands you control, and there's a lot of creatures out there that have power equal to the number of lands you control. There's also Lord of Extinction. This is a big one. Power and toughness are each equal to the number of cards in all graveyards. You can imagine a deck that wants to mill, this thing is going to get really big. And then I want to do a special call out for a big creature that transitions us to our next category. It's Old Stick Fingers. Old Stick Fingers is X black green for a star legendary creature horror. When you cast this spell, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards. Put all creature cards revealed this way into the graveyard, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Old Stick Fingers, power and toughness are each equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. A similar card, which I actually got confused about both of these, is Old Rutstein, which works perfectly too because it's got that mill every single turn. But it's not just mill for no reason. This can give you ramp with treasure tokens or blood tokens to filter out your draws. Like, Old Rutstein is going to be really good. And that's going to transition us to our next category because it's going to be really important for us to get these big creatures into our graveyard. There are some cards, combos that we could put together that'll get it done really easily. Hermit Druid could just mill our entire deck into our graveyard. We'll even have like an Anger or a Brawn or a Filth or something like that so that we can immediately attack with our commander and just one-shot someone. We might have an empty library, but we can kill someone for sure. That is how impactful and powerful and explosive this deck can be. But most of the time, we're going to be a little bit more careful when it comes to getting things into our graveyard. We want little bits of mill every single turn so that we can play lands from our graveyard, cast spells from our graveyard, or our opponent's graveyards. And actually, this was a struggle for me. I wanted to know whether I should play cards that just mill, that just really work with our commander. You know, simple things that come down early, like Altar of the Brood, Ghoul Caller's Bell, or Stitcher Supplier. These are all 1 mana. They get things in the graveyard pretty reliably and sometimes turn after turn. So it feels like if I have my commander out, I'm always going to be able to trigger it and cast something. These cards will be great if my deck is running smoothly. I'm just worried they'll make me rely too heavily on my commander. So I'm going to be looking to play cards like Grisly Salvage and Grapple with the Past. These are cards that I would naturally play anyways, and they're going to give me value while filling my graveyard up. So if I play them before I play my commander, I'm fine. It's a totally playable spell. But if I play it after, they get supercharged. They get even better because I get that advantage of playing from my graveyard the turn I milled those in there. I have a similar thing with my mana dorks. I'm going to play Skull Prophet, a 2 mana 3/1 that can add a black or a green, but then also you can tap it to put the top 2 cards of your library into your graveyard. Or Milliken, which again, 2 mana 0/1, mill a card, add a colorless. These are 2 mana dorks, and I would really like 1 mana dorks that fix for all 3 of my colors, like a Birds of Paradise or an Ignoble Hierarch. Those would be amazing, and I might include those in my deck. Anyways, I'm also looking to have my interaction deal with the graveyard too. Grist the Hungertide can be my removal, but it also mills. Witherbloom Command can be some of my interaction, but also mills. See, these decision points where you have your card draw, your mana ramp, your interaction, you know, the cards that you need in a commander deck all synergize well with your overall strategy. You want your strategy to work with your commander, but you don't necessarily want everything to be dependent on your commander, because then there's a single point of failure for your deck. So I'm going to want other ways to utilize the graveyard. I'm thinking about Reanimation. I'm going to run the classic Reanimate, Life Death, Animate Dead, tons of other reanimation spells. But there's a couple that I like a lot. One of them is Incarnation Technique. This is a 5 mana sorcery with Demonstrate, which means you can give your opponent a copy of the spell and then you get another copy. Mill 5 cards, then return a creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's a lot of milling. It means that you're feeding your graveyard while you're getting cool stuff back. Breach of the Multiverse is 7 mana. Each player mills 10 cards, and for each player, choose a creature, planeswalker card from that player's graveyard, put those cards in the battlefield under your control, then each creature you control becomes a Phyrexian in addition to its other types. And you know, I'm not going to go crazy on the big creatures because this is more of a grind out value deck, much more so than a cheat the biggest thing into the battlefield as fast as possible deck. But you're going to want a couple top end cards for this deck, so pick your favorites. Bladewing Deathless Tyrant. This is a 7 mana 6/6 flying haste, and it'll create a bunch of 2/2 zombies for each creature card in your graveyard, so that's some good synergy. Archon of Cruelty, 8 mana 6/6. On ETB and attack, they sack something, discard a card and lose 3 life, you draw a card and gain 3 life. That's a big swing. And Atali Primal Conqueror is just the classic 5-for-1 in multiplayer. 7 mana for a 7/7 trample, but when it enters the battlefield, you get a spell from each player. Oh, and if you transform it, it gets real big, real dangerous, and really hard to kill. The consistency of this deck is great because we have a lot of tutors that just dump things into our graveyard. Cards like Entomb, Unmarked Grave, Buried Alive. See, these can put a big Archon into our graveyard for reanimation, or it can just put whatever card we need into our graveyard so that our commander can immediately play it. I can also see this deck being extremely mana hungry, and so I think you need to pay extra close attention to your lands. In fact, effects like Exploration that lets you play an extra land per turn could be very good. Granted, you can only play 1 from your graveyards with Coram because it says play a land, but you can still play your second land from your hand with Exploration effects. And land strategies also seem to synergize really well with this milling. Let's look at World Shaper, a 4 mana 3/3 that when it attacks you mill 3 cards, and when it dies you return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Or Aftermath Analyst, 2 mana, enters the battlefield, mills 3 cards, and for 4 mana you can sacrifice it and return all lands cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. Lumra Bellow of the Woods is so good I had to mention it, even though it's a little ways away in Bloomborough, but this card's been previewed and it is so perfect in this deck. 6 mana star legendary creature Elemental Bear with Vigilance and Reach. Its power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control, which means in your graveyard, it's going to be big and pump your Coram. Whenever it enters the battlefield, mill 4 cards. We love milling, and then return all land cards from your graveyard to the battlefield tapped. It does everything you want. In fact, I've noticed even more sick land synergies, like 6. It mills and it gives things retrace, so sick. The Gitrog monster gives you extra land drops, which we know we want, and it also lets you draw cards when lands enter the graveyard from anywhere. So that means if you mill them, you're still drawing a ton of cards. We have Titania, Protector of Argoth, that's gonna pull lands from your graveyard back on the battlefield. We have other ways of getting lands back, like Crucible of Worlds or Ramanap Excavator, or even Life from the Loam. And Life from the Loam has Dredge, another great mechanic for this deck because it's going to be able to pull things into your graveyard every turn, and we could fill this deck with just whatever insane lands we want. Think of Realms Encharted, 2 and a green, search your library for up to 4 land cards with different names, reveal them, an opponent chooses 2 of those cards, put the chosen cards into your graveyard and the rest into your hand. Guess what? With your commander, you can just play one of the lands that they put into your graveyard. They have no choice but to give you exactly what you want. So I'm definitely going to play some land synergies here. Maybe Ob Nixilis draining you out as I pull a bunch of lands from the graveyard on the battlefield. Maybe I'll make some badgers or an army of scoot swarms. I don't know yet, but it's going to be so sweet. All right, so I can reanimate something huge. I can make my commander super big and deal commander damage. I can weaponize my lands by draining you out or going wide. I can also slowly drain you to death with a card like Sir Conrad the Grim. Every time a creature dies or is put into graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield or leaves my graveyard, it deals 1 damage to each opponent. It also has one of the best activated abilities for your commander. 1 in a black, each player mills a card. Oh, so good. We also have a similar effect with Blood Chief Ascension for a single black mana. Once it's activated, whenever a card goes into opponent's graveyard from anywhere, that includes milling, that player loses 2 life and I gain 2 life. I have dreams of Breach the Multiverse, dealing 20 damage to each opponent, and I get those creatures. Oh, I want to live that dream. But I'm far more likely to win with a card like Mindcrank, which combos with Blood Chief Ascension. And somewhat with Sir Conrad, it honestly just synergizes with this entire deck. Whenever an opponent loses life, that player mills that many cards. So combos aside, I can just deal combat damage and mill my opponent and then suddenly have access to playing all of their sweet cards. This deck looks sick. It's graveyard synergies, it's mill, it's reanimator, it's lands matters, it's a little bit of combo, and it could just smash because your commander can just get huge. In my preliminary testing, this deck performed super well. It's because it had the ability to ramp a lot and then grind value as the game progressed. I'm just excited to get more games in and fine-tune this list. Thank you to Wizards of the Coast for letting me bring you this awesome deck tech. And if you're interested in Modern Horizons, and you should be because this set is awesome, click the link down in the description. It'll tell you how to pick up some of these cards. But most importantly, you should get yourself out to a local game store, get your friends together, meet some new ones, and play some Magic. You can play with some of these pre-constructed decks or a brand new deck from Modern Horizons, or you can just take some of the best cards and slot them into your existing decks. I've used the cards from this set to upgrade so many of my commander decks. I'm just itching to play all of them. All right, thank you so much for joining me for this deck tech. Again, my name is DJ from the JumboCommander YouTube channel, and I hope to see you all at a local game store. Bye-bye.